So, okay, so you've done carnivore and noticed so many benefits from it. We've been talking a little bit about the lion diet. What was it about the lion diet that really kind of made you want to try it? And for the listener, if you could even just define what the lion diet is, why did you decide to take that extra step? I mean, a carnivore diet is already fairly restrictive. A lion diet just takes that to a further level. Like, what made you want to do that?
Yeah, see, I don't like the word restrictive. I don't think that the carnivore diet is a restriction diet, and I know that's not what you meant by that. I feel free on the carnivore diet. I don't feel restricted. I feel restricted if somebody says you can eat whatever you want, but you got to limit the amounts, and you got to fit it all within a certain amount of calories. We know that calories don't apply to the human body. You don't track you don't track time in inches, and you don't track body composition with calories. It's just that's a heat measurement system that's supposed to be used for a closed experiment. For comparing heat between steam engines. Human bodies don't operate that way, and so for so long I was tricking myself into eating less of the wrong foods when I just needed to reprioritize the right foods, and then everything else seems to fall in place after that. I'm sorry, I can't remember the original question.
Oh,
Did
it's
I
just all
answer?
about, yeah, about the lion diet. Like
Oh,
what was it
so
about the
then
lion diet?
right, and so then I started seeing all these benefits start to pile up, and I just realized, you know what, the lion diet's sounding better and better because I've been hearing Dr. Anthony Chafee talk about this, Jake Thomas, and a number of other people that have done it, and it just sounds like it makes sense. It sounds like it makes a lot of common sense, and so if I've already experienced this many benefits from the carnivore diet so far, I guess I could just expect to have more of the same benefits, right? And so what I noticed is that when I and so I started going back to back, and I would have like a couple days where I was like pretty much strict lion, which by definition is just red meat, water, salt. So the difference between the carnivore diet and the lion diet, it depends on who you ask, but most coaches, most nutritionists will tell you that the lion diet by definition is you're eating like a lion. It's as simple as that. So that's red meat from ruminant animals, water, and salt. Um, Ruminant animals, those digest better in human bodies, and those nutrients are more bioavailable because it's been digested 4 times, right? And ruminant animals have 4 stomachs, and so what I've noticed is that if I have one meal a day and my macros are the same, okay, but I have red meat and butter versus pork and butter or chicken and butter, whatever. But I just changed the protein source from something that's red meat to something that's not red meat. Sorry if this is too much information for your listeners, but normally in the morning I poop first thing in the morning and I'm one and done, and I don't even I got nothing the rest of the day. Okay, I'll have 2 bowel movements if I have if I have other food in addition to red meat. Red meat just it gets in me, it goes right through me, it digests great, especially because I don't overcook it. If it's meat that I'm familiar with where it's from and that I'm confident with where it's from, then I'm okay with eating it more on the rare side, um, like our like our ribeyes that Taylor and I did last night. I mean, those are barely sealed or seared, so they're totally raw in the inside still. That digests way easier and way faster than if you're cooking your food all the way through. My ground beef that I buy from the store, yeah, I cook that to medium because it goes through a bunch of processing and there's more chance of that being contaminated than anything else. But like if it's venison that I shot with my AR-15 right over here, like um, I'll barely cook it, like if at all. Like I've eaten parts of it raw, especially especially liver. I love raw liver. so um, these are these are all reasons that I started getting attracted to the lion diet and just wanting to give it a try. And I'm always up for a challenge too. And so I'm like, okay, it's gonna suck cutting artificial sweeteners. I like my intra workout pump drink. Let's see what else. Keto bricks that suck letting getting rid of those, but it just lasted for a couple days. I mean, after 5 or 6 days, I just felt great, and my inflammation was lower than it ever had been. So I found it particularly helpful for bulking. Actually, I was able to put on muscle mass, but not get fat while I was putting it on. I was able to recover faster. I really enjoyed it to the point to where I was like, man, if I ever thought about reintroducing carbs into my diet, I'm definitely not going to. The Lion Diet's also a true zero carb diet, or at least as close as you can really get to it. There's some carbs in liver. There's a little bit of carbs even in muscle tissue. They round it down to zero on the nutrition labels. But even eggs have a trace amount of carbs in them. Dairy, of course, has carbs in it. And so when you cut those last couple things out, then you're really, truly as close to zero carb as you can get. And so I went for 30 days the first time. And after I got to 30 days, I just wasn't in a hurry to get off of it. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I was able to do it while I was traveling and everything. We went out to, I think the highlight of it, the best meal that I had on the Lion Diet for sure was on the first weekend of November. That was the NPC Northwest Natural that I coached a couple bodybuilders through. I didn't compete in that one personally, but I was on the Lion Diet, and I coached these guys through it. And most of my athletes are either Lion or pretty close. So like 80% of what they eat, you could say is Lion Diet, and then the other 20% might be like keto bricks or butter or just like or eggs or whatever else. That sums up like most of the meal plans of the people that I'm coaching right now. So for our after party for that show, we didn't go to a pizza place. We didn't go to a bar. We went to a frickin' Brazilian steakhouse, bro. And I was eating, yeah, man. And I was eating ribeyes. I was eating picanha, which of course is the best cut to get at a Brazilian steakhouse.
Thank you.
And
Absolutely, it is.
yeah, and all of us loved it. Nobody complained. Nobody was like, "Oh, we don't get to eat carbs." No, dude, you're at a Brazilian steakhouse, man. They're like, forget about carbs. All right, like like we were eating like kings, and so certainly wasn't sick of it when I got back, and so I went for it for a few more weeks, and that brought us up to. It actually was exactly 49 days on Thanksgiving, which is where I was like, okay, we're done. Like, like it's Thanksgiving now, and so then. Same thing though, just stuck to all the fatty meats, right? Like no carbs on Thanksgiving either. That and then a keto brick. I miss keto bricks. And so from there I went into a 2-month keto brick bulk. Through the keto brick bulk, I basically added that. I added keto bricks, eggs, and then like a couple other foods. But I mean, really, man, it was pretty much just red meat, water, salt with those couple exceptions for 2 months straight all the way through Christmas. That brought me up to a couple weeks ago. And so I just did the math, and I gained 5.5 pounds of muscle and 1 pound of fat. But the interesting thing, even though I gained a pound of fat, I gained fat in direct proportion to what my body composition is. So that's why I don't look fatter. I just look bigger at the end of this bulk. That's how you do a bulk properly. It's okay to gain a little bit of fat, but if you're around 20% body fat or under 20% body fat, as long as you're gaining it at a rate that's less than 1 pound for every 5 pounds of muscle that you build, I'd say that's a successful bulk.
It's proportional. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. The people at our Brazilian steakhouse, they know us by first name, and like it's fun to go there, especially for me because I get to practice my Portuguese, which is great. They all speak Brazilian, which is awesome. Portuguese. But I'm curious. Does it ever surprise you for how hungry you go to those things? How like you think you're going to stay there for like 5 hours, and like 45 minutes to an hour, you're like the most delicious food. You can barely like even make your jaw chew the food anymore. Like your satiety hormones are so strong.
Man, my satiety hormones kick in, but yeah, dude, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's bottomless. It's all you can eat, and like you definitely pay handsomely when you go into a Brazilian steakhouse, and so I don't necessarily feel bad about it. But no, man, like I've been there for 3 or 4 hours before, just pounding it down. Like,
Wow.
oh yeah, like 6 or 7 pounds of meat later, and I'm
Wow.
back in the day. No, we didn't go that crazy on this last one. I don't know. I wasn't tracking. I probably had
That's
like
impressive.
2 or 3
That's
pounds of meat.
that's impressive. I maybe need to take more breaks in between or something because I always think I'm gonna just crush it and the food's so good, and then like 45 minutes later, like I can't even like take a bite of a ribeye anymore.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
the stomach stretch. You got to do the stomach stretch, man. You got to lean back. You got to really stretch out your stomach, and then
Oh
you
man.
do that about halfway through. You got room for a couple more pounds of meat. I promise.
Good tips. I love it. Like jumping up and down, maybe. That's great.
Yeah.
Uh, well, thank you very much for the detail on the lion diet. I really appreciate what you said about the ruminant animals versus the chicken and pork and other things. It's why I tell people like think
Yeah.
of beef as like the mainstay of a carnivore diet, and the other things are just condiments. I think most people would notice that they wouldn't feel as good if they were including them as a mainstay versus beef. And so I guess that brings me to what you're going to tell these kids as we're recording this. It is Heart Awareness Month or whatever it is in February. Um, you've been speaking a little bit more, and now you're speaking to a middle school. And I'm really curious, as you said, like, I'm definitely not going to tell a bunch of 6th and 7th graders to eat carnivore. I can't imagine how many parent phone calls you'd get after that if you decided to do that. But what are you planning? What are you planning on talking on? How are you going to help influence these kids and try to think a little bit differently about the foods they're eating?
Thanks. Yeah, because I'm sold on the Lion Diet, you know that, and one more thing on that is I think one of the reasons that it shines that a lot of people don't realize that it's not so much what you're eating, but what you're not eating anymore, which is why it's so good for people that struggle with autoimmune issues. But the but you're in a semi-fasted state, like basically the entire time you're on the diet, or at least much closer to a fasted state than if you're eating a standard American diet. Um, that's something that I really enjoyed, and something that I try to keep in mind as I'm teaching people that will never go on the Lion Diet, right? Like I don't expect, like my wife will never do this, but she's already 90% of the way there. She doesn't necessarily have to. Her diet is basically mine with the addition of bacon here and there, butter here and there, and eggs. Um, she likes her seasonings and her coffee, and then an occasional energy drink and an occasional glass of wine. But I mean, like she's 95% carnivore, and more specifically lion too. We don't do fish. We don't do a whole lot of chicken. Not that we don't like it. It's just like beef is that much better, and so why wouldn't we just stick to more of that? And that's what we like. It's what we enjoy. It's what our kids like for sure. So, okay, yeah. So we teach 3 common cardiovascular culprits. This is what we've been teaching because it's Heart Health Month and what we've been focusing on. But really, if I can, my entire goal is if I can get a 7th grader, or if I can get someone that is never going to do the carnivore diet, maybe even never heard of it, is intimidated by it, just to make 1 or 2 steps closer. That's better than nothing. It's a step in the right direction. So, as a full-time coach, there are 3 main foods that I see killing people's cardiovascular health that all people need, that people just need to reduce their consumption of or eliminate altogether. So 3 cardiovascular culprits, I call them. First one is processed seed oils. Second one is excessive carbohydrate intake, specifically refined sugar. And then number 3 is refined table salt and sodium from processed foods. So we'll start with number 1. That's processed seed oils. If there's anything worse than processed sugar, it's processed seed oils. It's abundant. It's abundant in most processed foods. It's usually called vegetable oil on nutrition labels. Also, canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut oil. Worst of all, soybean oil, because you get the hormonal issues that come along with the heart health problems with soybean oil, as you know. So any plant-based seed oils basically fall into this category. I found this study in the National Library of Medicine this morning, actually. It said the intake of omega-6 vegetable oils, particularly soybean oil, began to increase in the USA starting in the early 1900s, at a time when the consumption of butter and lard was on the decline. This is what you and I were talking about on my show. So this caused a more than 2-fold increase in the intake of linoleic of Lino, do you know how to pronounce that? It's
Yes, it's a tough one. Linoleic.
Lino. Okay, I've read it like a million times. I still don't know
I
how to
know
pronounce
it's
it.
hard. Linoleic.
Linoleic. Thank you for that. The main omega-6 polyunsaturated fat found in vegetable oils, which now adds up to 8 to 10% of total energy intake in the Western world. The omega-6 fat linoleic.
Yeah, nailed it. You got it.
Linoleic. Okay, great. That should not be confused with conjugated linoleic acid found in pasteurized animal foods. Sorry about that, man. Anyway, so I eat 250 to 300 grams of fat a day from animal sources specifically, and so do most of our clients. And so all of us have high LDL across the board, but we're not concerned about heart disease because, despite conventional wisdom, high LDL does not cause heart disease. And here again, you and I talked about that on our show too. So thanks again for your perspective on that, because it's funny how all the evidence that I have and all the evidence that you have is different, but we came to the same conclusions on this one. So most people who die from heart attacks actually have normal cholesterol ratings. Cholesterol is fuel for hormones and for your brain. So fat is vital to your health, and fat from seed oils is detrimental to your heart, though. So fat from animal sources, from bioavailable sources, is what we want to be focusing on. My general advice for beginners is to just find one food in your diet that contains seed oils that you are okay with living without. So some suggestions are like, some everyday suggestions are like replacing margarine with butter, making burgers at home instead of going to McDonald's, replacing breakfast bars and convenient breakfast with bacon and eggs. It's cheaper and it's easier and it tastes better too. Cardiovascular killer number 2 is processed sugars. So I just read this in Dr. Anthony Chafee's book, but in 1997, the USDA proclaimed that saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease and a host of other diseases, now shown to be based on fraudulent data used to cover up the real culprit, which is sugar, or more specifically, fructose. Since then, we've reduced our fat and red meat intake by 30%, and yet all of the, as a nation is what he's saying, and yet all the diseases claimed to be caused by excess fat intake increased dramatically. Cardiovascular disease rates tripled, the obesity rate tripled, and even cancer rates have tripled. There's something else that people don't realize too. Autism has also increased dramatically. And so this one hit me pretty hard when I was reading this one this morning because as a father of an autistic child, I see the detrimental effects of processed sugar and that it has on perhaps a higher level than like what most people do. I believe that I'm also undiagnosed, partly autistic. And so many of the problems that my son experiences when he eats sugar are the same things that I experience too. And that's brain fog, energy crashes, body inflammation, increased and uncontrollable appetite. Dr. Anthony Chafee cites a recent Harvard study saying that 2,000 people who eliminated processed sugar replaced sugar with minimally processed animal food sources. They significantly they significantly improved their cardiovascular health and reversed many diseases. Dr. Kiltz and I talked about that at length too, as he documents his work from Dr. Anthony Chafee on pages 124 and 125 of his book Keto's Kilt is Carnivore. Have you heard of that book, Dr.
I have
Anthony?
not.
Dr. Kiltz's book. It's a really, really good one,
Oh,
man.
I've heard of his fertility book, but I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, this one's pretty new. It just came out.
Cool. Have to get it.
Yep. So then, my advice for beginners on this one is to just find one sugary food. Here again, in your daily food consumption that you are okay living without. And so, some replacement suggestions might be like fruit snacks, replacing that with a real apple. It's a step in the right direction. Snickers bar, you can replace that with a protein bar, or better yet, beef jerky. Regular soda, you can replace that with diet soda, right? Diet sodas, yeah, they have a lot of unhealthy ingredients too, but it's still a step in the right direction from something that's loaded with high fructose corn syrup. And then cardiovascular killer number 3 is refined sodium. So most processed foods are way too high in refined sodium. When people come to the carnivore diet too, they think that they're deficient in electrolytes. That's usually just temporary. If you notice something, most people that are on ketogenic diets, they're big into supplementing electrolytes. Most carnivores aren't, because once you get rid of in particular fiber and a lot of these plants that are stealing more nutrients than what they're giving you, um, most carnivores that I know don't have any need to supplement magnesium and potassium and additional electrolytes. Personally, I do though, because because here again, I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a competitive athlete, and so tracking sodium and magnesium is really important to us and something that we make sure that we're always on top of. My advice for beginners when it comes to salt is to just ask yourself, what's one processed food that's high in sodium that you can live without? If you're using like Morton's iodized sea salt, for example, then please stop. Please replace it with a natural sea salt. The problem is not that we consume so much sodium per se, as we consume way more sodium in proportion to other trace minerals that our cardiovascular system does need, like magnesium and like potassium. So natural sea salts that have these trace elements, they're difficult to overconsume. You'll get sick of eating salt way before you're at a point where you're eating too much salt. And so if your overall diet is lower in foods that are highly processed and have sodium, then you can be sure that if you're salting food to satiety, you're okay with how much salt you're consuming. So my personal favorite salts are Celtic sea salt, pink potassium, cave salts from Catalonia, Spain, not to be confused with pink Himalayan salt. Pink Himalayan salt a lot of times has heavy toxic metals in it because there's explosives that are used to go obtain the salt um, that's been preserved for so many years. That's why I like to stick with fresh sea salts or something like this one from Catalonia, Spain. It has almost as much potassium as it does sodium in it too. So here again, it's like impossible to consume too much sodium, and that's my primary potassium supplement. That and then Baja Gold sea salt. That one's loaded with magnesium. It also has a very low sodium content, and so I go back and forth between those two, and then some finishing salts like the ones that you and I were talking about on our show. I'll do those from time to time, but really for the most part, my best advice is just to salt foods, even beverages, to taste. And then when salt tastes gross, stop eating salt. When salt tastes good, add more salt. Here again, you'll get grossed out way before you have to worry about eating too much salt if you're just eating natural sea salts the way that God made it.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. I think of these kids coming to the age where they can be prescribed Ozempic, they can be recommended to get bariatric surgery, and you're coming in and giving them some simple tips, again, to take a step. It's not to have an extreme diet, but to take a step in the right direction. I think
Mhm.
these kids are very fortunate to learn from you. I know I certainly learned a
Thanks.
lot of this episode, and I think the listener will walk away with a lot of really important tips and tricks that they can implement in their lives. I always love talking to you, Cole. This has been a great conversation. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Everything is supersetyourlife.com. Other than that, at Colt Milton on Instagram. And then our two podcasts are the supersetyourlife.com podcast. We publish on Mondays and Fridays. And then Carnivore Coaches Corner, we publish on Wednesdays. We go deep into nutrition on that one. Other than that, our YouTube channel is Skullbells TV, SKULLBELLZ. And we are active on all the above.
That's awesome. We will link to all of that. I can't recommend your podcast enough. I love them both. I love listening to all the content you put out there.
Thanks.
It's very thoughtful. I love that you're experimenting on yourself and sharing that with the world, and that
I've learned a lot from you, bro.
I don't think so. We do still need to skate soon, though. We do need to get together on the ice
Amen to
and
that.
play a game and get a ribeye afterwards. Colt Milton, again, always enjoyed to chat with you. Thank you so very much for everything you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.